Opportunity basketball player, getting out in transition, getting easy layups that way. So she's just a workhorse, and really just the game comes to her, and she takes full.
The deafening roar of 20,000 fans at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse faded into a hushed vibration that seemed to echo in Caitlin Clark's chest as she pulled her father aside into the dimly lit tunnel before the 2024 NCAA championship game, her hands trembling not from fear of the stage or the weight of the moment, but from the even heavier burden of words she had been carrying in her heart for months. Words that she knew would forever reshape how her father understood her journey and the private decisions she had already made about her future, a decision that spoke less of basketball and more of love, gratitude, and sacrifice. It is a strange paradox of life that in our most triumphant moments when the world sees only victory and glory, we sometimes carry our deepest secrets, and the people who love us most are often the last to know the quiet vows we make in the silence of our own hearts, vows born not of ambition, but of selflessness. As Caitlin walked with her father, Brent, into that narrow hallway where the noise of the arena softened into muffled thunder, she was not the superstar guard about to play the biggest game of her career. She was still the daughter who remembered him waking before sunrise to head to a construction site, his hands calloused and his back sore, yet never too tired to rebound for her after long shifts, never too weary to believe in her dreams when the world doubted, and never too distracted to remind her that family was the foundation on which any true success must be built. Brent, at 52, bore the visible marks of those sacrifices. The lines etched deeply into his face from years of hard labor, the stiffness in his movements from decades of heavy lifting, yet in his eyes was still the same light he carried when he watched his little girl dribble a ball on their cracked driveway, her ponytail bouncing, her laughter echoing like music against the backdrop of an ordinary Midwestern evening. He looked at her now with that same blend of pride and protective concern, sensing that there was something in her demeanor beyond pre-game nerves, for in the weeks leading up to this night, he had noticed subtle changes. Extra hugs after team dinners, longer pauses in their conversations, the way her gaze lingered on him as though memorizing something she was afraid of losing. What Caitlin had carried in her heart for over a year was not only a decision about basketball, but a promise she had whispered to herself in moments of solitude, a vow that no matter how bright the lights of fame grew, she would never allow success to cost her the bond that had shaped her into the person she was. And so she had planned this conversation long before the season even began, knowing that if her team made it this far, if she stood once again on the threshold of history, she would finally tell him what she had hidden, that she was prepared to shape her professional choices around his well-being, that her career path would not simply be dictated by contracts and opportunities, but by the deeper responsibility she felt to honor the man who had sacrificed everything for her. "Dad," she whispered now, her voice nearly lost beneath the dull roar of the crowd outside. "I should have told you this months ago, but I was waiting for the right moment." And though she hadn't yet spoken the full weight of her vow, Brent instinctively understood that his daughter was carrying something enormous in her heart. For Caitlin, the championship game was no longer just about cutting down nets, hoisting trophies, or cementing her place in basketball history. It was also about keeping a promise that only she and her father would ever fully understand, a promise forged years earlier when she first realized the sacrifices he made were not temporary but lifelong, when she saw him come home late, covered in dust and sweat, pretending that the exhaustion in his eyes wasn't there, so that she would feel nothing but encouragement. She had told herself then, as a teenager chasing a dream, that one day she would repay him not with money or accolades, but with choices that placed his peace of mind above her own ambition. And now, in this tunnel on the edge of history, that vow was about to be spoken aloud for the first time. Her father stood in silence, bracing himself as he had braced steel beams in his career, steady and unshakable, though inside his chest a storm was gathering because he sensed his daughter's words would not only change how he viewed her future, but would transform their relationship forever. The tunnel around them seemed to narrow, time slowing as coaches barked last-minute instructions and teammates stretched in the distance. Yet in that intimate corner away from the chaos, a daughter prepared to honor her father with the most profound truth she had ever shared. It was a truth that revealed how the journey to greatness is never walked alone, that behind every seemingly unstoppable athlete is often a quiet story of unseen sacrifice, and that the ultimate measure of love is not in grand speeches, but in the private promises we keep, even when no one else is watching. As Caitlin steadied herself to finally speak the words she had rehearsed 1,000 times in her mind, the noise of 20,000 fans returned like a rising tide, reminding her that history was waiting, but for her, history would always be secondary to the man standing before her, the man who had given her the strength to become not just a champion on the court, but a daughter capable of choosing love over ambition and selflessness over glory.
A decent job of keeping them out of the paint, but it's because they got so many threes. So being able to keep people in front, not having to be in a constant rotation is.
The deafening roar of Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, filled with 20,000 fans anticipating history, softened into a strange, almost surreal quiet in Caitlin Clark's mind as she led her father by the arm into the dimly lit tunnel just moments before the 2024 NCAA championship game, her palms trembling not from nerves about the crowd, not from the pressure of the cameras waiting to immortalize her performance, but from the immense emotional weight of words she had rehearsed silently in her heart for over a year, words she knew would change her father's understanding of everything they had worked towards together, words that would alter the trajectory of her life and redefine the very concept of victory. For years, Brent Clark had watched his daughter's meteoric rise, from driveway basketball sessions in the fading evening light of Iowa summers to sold-out arenas where her name reverberated like a battle cry for a generation of fans. And he had always assumed, like everyone else, that the pinnacle of her journey would be the WNBA, that the culmination of countless sacrifices, the early mornings, the exhausting travel, the endless hours of repetition and training, was a professional career waiting just beyond this night. But what Caitlin was about to reveal would show that her dreams had grown in a direction few could have predicted, a direction born not of ambition alone, but of the profound love she felt for the man who had sacrificed everything so she could stand here on the edge of history. Brent had noticed subtle changes in her in recent weeks, though he had dismissed them as pre-championship nerves. The lingering looks across the dinner table, the way she hugged him longer than usual, the careful attention with which she studied his movements as if memorizing moments that should have been routine. Now, standing in the tunnel with her Iowa jersey hanging loosely from her shoulders, her eyes shimmering with a mixture of resolve and sorrow, he understood that something much deeper had been stirring within her. Placing his weathered hands, hardened from 30 years of construction work, on her shoulders, he whispered, "What is it, sweetheart? You can tell me anything." Those hands had built the foundation of her life, both literally and symbolically, hands that had paid mortgages, hands that had bought basketball shoes when money was tight, hands that had rebounded thousands of shots and driven her to gyms in the freezing dark of winter mornings, hands that were now stiffening with arthritis and weakened from decades of lifting, but still steady enough to carry the weight of his daughter's confession. Caitlin inhaled deeply, the kind of breath one takes before diving into cold, uncertain water, and finally let the truth fall into the sacred silence between them. "Dad, this is my last game," she said, her voice trembling at first but gaining strength as the words found their place. "Not just my last college game, my last game ever. I'm not going to the WNBA. I'm not going to play professional basketball." The silence that followed was deafening, more profound than the crowd's roar. Brent blinked, trying to process words that seemed to shatter the narrative that had defined their lives for 15 years. Everyone in the country expected Caitlin Clark to be the #1 pick in the upcoming draft. Her professional career was supposed to be the reward for all their sacrifices, the crowning achievement of her talent and their shared struggle. "Caitlin, what are you talking about?" Brent asked, his voice breaking with confusion, pain, and disbelief. "You're about to be drafted first overall. This is everything we've worked for." But Caitlin had anticipated this response, because the conversation she was having tonight had been meticulously planned in her mind for over a year, ever since she had insisted on accompanying her father to a routine doctor's appointment and heard the words that had changed her perspective forever. Chronic back pain, early signs of arthritis, the long-term effects of decades of relentless physical labor. She remembered sitting in the sterile white room, staring at her father while the doctor spoke, feeling as though the air had been stolen from her lungs. That was the day she made a private vow that she never shared with her mother, her coaches, or even her closest friends, that she would not allow her father's sacrifices to consume what remained of his strength, that she would shape her future not around fame or fortune but around the chance to give him the peace and comfort he had denied himself so she could pursue her dreams. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached back into memory. "Dad, do you remember when I was 8 and you hurt your back at work and couldn't play basketball with me for 3 months?" Brent nodded slowly, the memory resurfacing with painful clarity. The accident on a construction site, the fear that he wouldn't be able to provide for his family, the shame of not being able to run drills with his daughter in the driveway. "I remember," he said softly. Caitlin's tears slipped down her cheeks as she continued. "That night, I heard you crying in your bedroom. You thought you let me down because you couldn't afford to send me to basketball camp that summer. That night I made a promise to myself. I promised that one day, when I was successful enough, I would take care of you, the way you always took care of me. That you would never have to worry about money again. Never have to hurt yourself working another day if you didn't want to." What Brent didn't know was that throughout her senior year, Caitlin had been quietly preparing for this moment. While teammates focused on draft interviews and agents, she had been meeting with financial advisors and investment specialists, learning how to transform her fame into lasting security through endorsement deals, speaking engagements, basketball camps, and media opportunities. She had realized that her name, her image, her influence had become valuable enough to build a life beyond professional play, a life that could generate more income in a single year than her father could earn in a decade of construction. "But Dad," she said, her voice cracking with both determination and love, "I can't do that if I'm traveling the country playing basketball for the next 10 years. I can't take care of you if I'm never home. I can't be there for you the way you've always been there for me." Brent stared at her, his heart swelling with conflicting emotions, pride, sorrow, disbelief, gratitude, because what he heard in his daughter's words was not just a career decision but the purest declaration of love he had ever known. She was willing to give up the dream they had sacrificed everything for, not because she was tired, not because she lacked the desire, but because she had found something more important, the chance to give back to him. His voice, thick with emotion, broke the silence. "Caitlin, you can't give up your dreams for me. That's not what I want. That's not what any of this was for." But Caitlin, now steadied by the strength of her conviction, pulled out her phone and showed him the detailed plan she had been building for months. Contracts with major brands waiting to be signed, outlines for youth camps and clinics, speaking engagements lined up, media appearances that would allow her to shape the next generation of athletes without sacrificing the intimacy of family life. "Dad," she said, her voice glowing with certainty now, "this isn't giving up my dreams. This is expanding them.